through.
Mr Deputy Speaker, I rise to speak to the 2021-22 budget. Having been in this place for 13 budgets, 10 of them Labor, I can agree that this is a typical Labor budget. It is a budget in which they are losing control of law and order, housing, the health system and of the state government finances. In terms of the state finances, we typically see debt and deficit blowouts, a long-range surplus projected but not worth the paper it's written on, living beyond our means, high taxing, new taxing, investment in infrastructure is light and delayed and recycled. Regarding debt in those 10 Labor budgets, I've seen state debt blow out year upon year via the Labor way, because the underlying attitude is that it's only government money. You can always get more, we'll increase taxes on the rich, or just keep going back to business, the cash cow, because they can afford it, like there is a government money tree. This laissez-faire attitude to government finances means our grandchildren will be saddled with the government debt in the range of $127 billion and rising. So it says, let future generations of Queenslanders pay for the financial ineptitude of long-term Labor governments. Some have described this Labor way as stealing from our grandchildren. Mr Deputy Speaker, next week I will become a grandfather for the first time. Poppy Robbo and Grandma Julie will be pouring out love and gifts on Junior. But the last thing we want to do is to burden our son and his wife and their first child with the debt of our generation. But that is what Labor are doing and have been doing in now 2 long-term Labor governments, the Beattie Bligh Labor government of 14 years roughly duration, and now this Palaszczuk Labor government that will be 10 years by the time we get to the next election. This government has been racking up generational debt for a long time, long before COVID, long before the GFC. These are systemic issues, and when will Labor governments learn to live within their means over the long term and balance their books like everyone else has to, every family, every business and every government? Mr Deputy Speaker, building job-creating big-ticket infrastructure items and keeping them on budget and on time is critical. We see Labor's rail fail at another level in this budget when we consider the Cross River Rail. The government's $5.4 billion Cross River Rail project has blown out to $6.88 billion and rising, despite assurances that it would be delivered on time and on budget. Mr Deputy Speaker, as I've said in this House, and just this week again, Queenslanders are carrying the Palaszczuk government's failures on the economy like a ball and chain around our ankles. Labor went broke in the Bligh era in a mining boom before the GFC. They lost our AAA credit rating. They sold $15 billion of assets and spent it all without paying debt down. And all with debt hurtling toward $100 billion before COVID. As I've said, their policies have stifled the tourism industry recovery, and they want the feds to solve the problem they have partly created. Shutdowns without notice nor communication, like the Stratty camping ground shut down at Easter, hurt small tourism operators and other small businesses that rely on those bookings, and they rely on the certainty. And the workers that rely on the work remain underemployed. Mr Deputy Speaker, international education is also doing it tough. ABS data says that Australia's onshore international education sector was worth $40 billion prior to COVID. It has fallen since to approximately $31 billion as at April 2021 and heading further south. Queensland has had a good share of that industry, but this government has failed to position Queensland well for when the international borders open up and we can take students again and rebuild this job-creating industry. While I'm no fan of Labor in Victoria, Victoria has taken steps to position itself comparative to Queensland for when the doors reopen. One step was to put together a detailed proposal for a quarantine hub, one that addressed the issues that satisfied the federal government's requirements to keep us safe and other logistical areas. In contrast, despite repeated requests for the same detail, the Queensland government was unable to do so, and so has failed to establish a plan for a hub. So states like Victoria will be prepared and able to take international students once they are vaccinated and through the quarantine hubs, which will give Victoria an advantage over Queensland education operators, all while the Queensland government dithers. This multi-billion-dollar industry will go south unless corrective action is taken, and I call on the Palaszczuk government to do better and to do more in this preparation. But the budget does have a little good news for the Redlands coast. The Redlands Hospital upgrade finally may be happening, though the ICU may still be some years off. But there is no evidence, sadly, of an increase in palliative care funding, though I still hope to hear further about that, nor plan to soon end the ambulance ramping in this upgrade. In terms of marine infrastructure, I've mentioned the Harold Walker jetty to be restored. The budget papers also reveal, in terms of Wellington Point High, something I've been calling out for some time, which is an upgrade to the deteriorating hall. The government finally appears to have agreed to that by providing $800,000, and I'm assuming that it is to that particular building, though not clear yet. It's not enough. It will help, and more detail we need to see. In terms of the Mount Cotton Fire Station, well, that's an absolute farce. The member for Springwood, Minister de Brenny, promised a new fire station in Mount Cotton, before the election, and he named the road that it would be on in Mount Cotton. But the budget papers revealed is going somewhere else, not to Mount Cotton's in the Redlands, another broken election promise. Mr Deputy Speaker, this budget was a missed opportunity for many projects and services that I will keep fighting for, like the Wellington Point Breakwater project, facilities and air conditioning for all of the schools in the Udjuru electorate, and that's a program that's going along, but going along very slowly in my electorate for some reason, slower than the 3 Labor members in the Redlands. I'll let people come to their own conclusions on that. Police resources for community safety, sustainable fishing, including artificial reefs, and I've mentioned things like regularly about koala protection measures, water quality in terms of runoff into southern Moreton Bay, turtle, dugong and other marine and fisheries research, and more targeted funding to North Stradbroke Island with the economic transition coming close to an end. In terms of jobs and businesses, Mr Deputy Speaker, small businesses and tourism operators are doing it tough in the Redlands, as I've said. Tourism has been hammered. The government must work more effectively with the chambers of commerce and all businesses so that all can prosper on North Stradbroke Island and the mainland part of Redlands Coast. And I've spoken about this several times, and I'll continue to call for that. The funding to be returned to the North Stradbroke Island Chamber of Commerce that was cut so that they can continue to support and help grow the businesses again that Labor has deserted. In terms of transport and roads infrastructure, major state arterial roads in Redlands coast are choked and clogged with traffic. State Redlands roads have fallen behind and into disrepair over decades. They need hundreds of millions of dollars to catch up. The state government is conducting very little road work on major arterial roads. The Cleveland-Redland Bay road it is disappointing that the government is working at a snail's pace on this particular upgrade, the only probably one of or the only major upgrade of road that we can see in the budget at this point, with only $14.6 million allocated out of $110 million promised in this budget. We need to move at a faster pace than that. They've also cut out the Thornland section from this project, meaning it's only a partial duplication, not the full duplication. One other section of road where our pressure did get help and provide a result was in the Gateway Motorway on-ramp upgrade at Old Cleveland Road. With respect to the Cleveland line duplication from Manly to Cleveland, I've raised this infrastructure project many times and I continue to call on the government to provide it. It has been promised before by Labor governments and costed at approximately $170 million going back in those earlier times, then cancelled by Labor. So it will now cost approximately $300 million or even more. For Redlands Coast to participate in the Olympics via sporting venues, this needs to be built and work starting sooner than later. Also, for Cross River Rail to be any value to Redlands Coast commuters, the Cleveland line duplication is critical and should have been built concurrently with Cross River Rail, or even before. While speaking of the Cross River Rail, I again repeat what transport experts say, that the government's promise of 14 minutes time savings of the Cleveland line is contingent upon the line duplication occurring when Cross River Rail opens. As I mentioned in my address and reply speech, the member for Capalaba promised at an election that when Cross River Rail is built, it will save 14 minutes from the train commute to the city. Labor has not since repeated that election promise, certainly not recently, and locals are wondering if it's still an active promise or is it a broken promise. So I call on Labor to tell us which one it is at the next opportunity. But I was glad to hear the member for Capalaba finally join my call for the Eastern Busway to be built in time for the Olympics. In the lead-up to the budget, Labor members suddenly rediscovered the Eastern Busway in their language, and locals read that as a possible budget announcement. Hopefully this Donny-come-lately attitude actually has some substance behind it, not just Labor words. In terms of the Olympics, the budget has proved a missed opportunity for Labor to show us the money, to provide proof that they are going to be inclusive of the Redlands coast in the Olympics infrastructure commitments. The evidence of funding, even planning, design, refreshed business cases, funding, etc., even in the forwards and beyond, for the Eastern Busway, the Cleveland line and state arterial road duplications in support of the Olympics in the future, so that Redlands can provide supporting venues and to alleviate the current congestion as soon as possible. With this budget opportunity now gone, I called on the Premier in question time this morning to at least confirm that these key public transport infrastructure items are included in the Olympics bid, in the proposal, to put it beyond doubt, and to even provide us with costings and construction timelines on these projects so that we know we have been included in the Redlands coast, and that everyone from the Redlands coast, the City Council, the businesses, families, commuters, others, can start planning around these developments and pipelines of work. Sadly today, the Premier refused to confirm the situation. Locals are watching with a heightened expectation of Labor delivering, and I'm sure if this state government lets them down, they will send them a clear message at the 2022 federal election and 2024 state elections. Mr Deputy Speaker, in terms of health, I spoke recently on a motion and there's various aspects of health in that motion. I encourage people to read, so I'm not repetitive of all of that. But we have this health crisis that Redlands also is part of. While as I said, I don't want to repeat everything I've said in previous speeches, but Labor are losing control of health in Queensland and Redlands, whether it's emergency department times, whether it's elective surgery, dental surgery, mental health incidences, ambulance ramping, palliative care provision. On every metric at Redlands Hospital, sadly, it's blowing out. The Redlands Hospital ambulance ramping has become as high as 51%, which is as bad as it has been in our area ever, to my understanding. And the long wait just to get a car park, and that will be paid parking at best. The government needs to also confirm whether they're going to, what that fee is going to be, and whether the current free parking will be all continued or some of that taken out. Under this Premier, like under Anna Bligh, Queensland Health is a basket case and getting worse. And that's despite the hard work of our overstretched doctors, nurses and allied health professionals. The government claims a record health budget will fix it, but we've heard the same thing year upon year. If you truly care about people, it's not only about money, but our frontline services having access to the specific resources they need, and Queenslanders having access to a world-class health system. Then there's if the government wanted to do something further, there's the Redlands Residential Aged Care Centre, a state facility right on the Redlands Hospital precinct. If you want to do something about bed blockage yourselves, you could do something and expand that aged care centre. That would actually be a great help. You could expand palliative care as well.
Order,
finally,
members.
Mr Deputy Speaker, in terms of this state budget, it is a typical Labor budget that does little to get Queensland through the difficult times that we are in and is full of broken promises to the Redlands. It provides little relief for Redlanders and doesn't deliver our fair share of infrastructure and services. Redlands can only hope that the desire to hold a successful Olympics will force the government to act on big-ticket infrastructure items.